What a day, what a night, what a show. I mean, I'd asked onto this show the world's most famous atheist, Richard Dawkins. Now, he is the superstar of atheism, which is the belief that there is no God. Now, he earned that status with bestsellers such as The God Delusion, in particular, and The Selfish Gene. And as a former professor at Oxford, he was admired almost everywhere for his attacks on Christianity. But then events, terrorist events, made him also take on Islam, which he called the greatest force for evil in the world today. He also mocked it. He pointed out in a tweet that Trinity College, Cambridge University, one college of Cambridge University, had produced more winners of the Nobel Prize than had all Islam. Suddenly, Richard Dawkins became not quite the golden boy of the intellectual elites or our ABC, which had been fating him up to that point. A radio station in California, for instance, disinvited him because of those comments, which is interesting, you think? So I wanted to talk to him about that kind of stuff, because he's now touring Australia and New Zealand for what's billed the Science in the Soul series of lectures. I invited him, he accepted, all good. Except 2 hours ago, less than, we started to get the first of a very long series of demands, restrictions on what we could actually talk about. A publicist said, don't portray him as a hero of the right, which I wasn't going to do, but whatever. Then don't mention Islam specifically, Dawkins said. I shall not appear if Islam is mentioned specifically, which is a bit crazy. I mean, he says Islam is the most dangerous religion, but I can't ask him about that. Another demand, don't distinguish between Christianity and Islam either, Dawkins then said. I shall not do so. Okay. And then this from the publicist. Dawkins also doesn't want to be asked why he doesn't want to be asked, why he doesn't want to distinguish between Christianity and Islam. On it went. Oh, this one was a good one. Oh, I must also not ask about Lawrence Krauss or the Me Too movement. Who's Lawrence Krauss, you might ask? Well, Krauss happens to be the astrophysicist, another darling of the ABC, who pulled out of this same speaking tour with Dawkins after sexual harassment claims were made against him, claims that he denies, so I couldn't ask about that either. This is getting ridiculous. Then I got another threat. Oh, your promo mentioned Islam. I'm probably not going to come now. I said, well, bugger off. Bugger off. I tell you what, I've never felt more like the show that should have been here and that now has been reinstated, Whiskey with a Mate. I need this whiskey, particularly after that coughing fit. That'll be very help. And my mate is going to be John Roskam, head of the IPA, who was kind enough to rush in, unshaven, to have a drink with me. John, thank you for saving the show.
Great to be with you,
and
Andrew.
I bought a very fine whiskey, which is Nicker whiskey from the barrel. It's high proof. I've had it before. I was going to get a different one, but
it looks Japanese.
It is Japanese. They blend this one. The Japanese, they take a tradition and they
You mean they culturally appropriate it, Andrew?
Smart of you, John. Culturally appropriated Scotch whiskey. I should not drink this. No,
Right.
what I'll do, I'll take revenge. I'll drink it all. No one can have it then. Mate, cheers. You've helped me. What do you make of this Dawkins stuff?
This champion of freedom of speech that has discovered the totalitarianism of the left, a man who most people would regard as of the left, has discovered freedom of speech and has discovered what happens when you speak about these issues, and then he gets afraid. And it takes courage to speak up, and sadly he doesn't have that courage sometimes.
Isn't that amazing? Don't ask me about Islam.
And the best bit is, don't ask me about, don't talk about the questions you're not allowed to talk about.
Don't ask me why you can't ask me about... I said, Richard
So what is he going to
Dawkins.
talk about on this tour?
Well, I was going to ask you, I think the opening question
You were
was,
going to ask him.
how's the weather, mate? How about it? How's it hanging? What about them royals? I mean, really, what a wuss.
It's disappointing, isn't
What
it?
do you think's going through his mind? I think associating with me, maybe that's it.
No, but there was a clue in what you said about you can't portray him as a champion of the right. And so,
I think that was it.
And one of the things from my
that's it.
perspective is, since when does standing up for freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of association make you a champion of the right? As we've spoken about a few times, 100 years ago, that made you a champion of the left. Now he's running away from these freedoms. It's really disappointing.
Yeah,
I
it's
won't
funny.
buy his next book.
I'm not an atheist, but I'm not a religious person either. I'm agnostic because I just think, atheism, a belief that there's no God, because you can't prove it, is, well, what's the difference between a belief in a no God or a belief in God? It's still a belief, right? So I just say, I don't know. I'm not smart enough to figure it out, so I don't know. Yet I can't help thinking, if Christianity wasn't true or didn't exist, you'd have to invent it as a socialising influence.
That's
I
right.
want to ask him about that. What do you reckon?
And exactly, and his argument, there's no difference between Christianity and Islam. Well, you could argue that.
I can't ask him that.
But you could also argue about the point that he made about Nobel Prize winners. You could mount the argument that Western civilization and Christianity has given him the right to speak, the ability to speak in front of crowds and talk about religion.
But
that some religions don't provide.
I think that's absolutely right. I mean, Christianity seems more open to having arguments and criticism and allowing free speech. I mean, it's had huge gaps in that. Remember the Spanish Inquisition, etc. I know that.
He doesn't say, I can't come on and talk about Christianity, though, does he?
No, that's exactly right.
Sorry.
I don't think he ever asked the program, don't ask me about Christianity, not her name.
That's right.
The thing is, Christianity seems a religion where you can actually be one of the world's great. Isaac Newton, great Christian, bit loony in some areas. Some say the greatest scientist ever lived. It's not incompatible.
The dissenting tradition in Christianity has given us the world's great scientists, or many thereof, and it is not incompatible to believe in God and believe in the rationality of science.
But it's more than
But we're not allowed to talk about that with him.
George Pell once said to me, I'm just living off the fat of Christianity as an atheist, when he was trying to convince me,
Did he
come to
succeed?
faith. Mate, I don't want to break your heart because you're a Catholic, but listen, like I say, if the Pope woke up one morning and thought, I don't believe in God, I'd say to him, please keep saying you do, because we need you. And so I was looking at Robert Putnam, professor of social,
Yes.
He's Harvard professor.
His bowling alone work is very significant. Loneliness, alienation, the meaninglessness of life, he's very strong on, very good.
Yes, is probably the most influential living sociologist.
Probably, yes. Yep.
He wrote in his book American Grace, based on 2 massive surveys, that Christians, in fact, these surveys suggest Christians, better volunteers, more generous financial givers, more likely to give blood, more likely to help the homeless, more likely to give time to people that are a bit down, more likely to get involved in civic life. True or not?
Absolutely true. Christianity, not just through the Renaissance, through the Reformation, has given us the great political movements, democracy, and of course the abolition of slavery, which was a Christian movement which not enough people recognise.
How come you brought a book of one of my favourite authors? Maybe
Well-
I was just wondering, is he my favourite author? Could be close. Charles Dickens.
Well, I'll have to explain why I brought the
Because I know it's a book I asked you to read, and you promised to have it finished about a month ago.
Well, Andrew, I haven't
A month ago,
I
John.
haven't been able to show my face on the Bolt report until I have finished the book that you said is one of the greatest, most important books you've ever read, that my wife absolutely loves, that I had never discovered
taste, Benny.
because it's 900 pages long. I'm a great expectations person. I'm 50 pages short, but I told you that
Are
2
you
weeks
still
ago.
50
I'm
pages?
still 50 pages
You were
short.
50 pages short 2 weeks ago.
But I'm happy to admit to you and the viewers, it is a wonderful, very special book, albeit very long.
Although you can't finish it. Honestly,
I'm saving it.
this is what worries me, right? When even the head of a think tank thinks too long. I don't know that gets taught much in schools. I know this on the curriculum. Charles Dickens, his books, because they mix fiction, wonderful satire. We were talking about Tom Wolfe yesterday.
Great characters.
Unbelievable
Beautiful writing.
stereotype. Characters that live on, like that's a real parody of the Greenpeace type, right?
Yes.
The Greenpeace type. All talk, no action, very concerned about the natives way over there, totally indifferent to suffering right
What's happening here.
Yeah, exactly right. Mrs. Jellyby, I'm thinking of there. People who love to preach. I've forgotten now her name because I finished that book again 2 months ago, John. Pardiggle, Mrs. Pardiggle. The fact that it's so long means it won't be in schools. No one's got the attention span anymore.
And it's hard. And
It's not hard.
No, it's hard. But it's worth it. I mean, I nearly teared up when... I don't want to give
When you
away
had
the
to
story.
read another 50
No. When we get to the story of what happens to Joe, the crossing sweeper.
Oh, Joe the Crossing Sweeper. Fantastic.
Don't
That's
let
the
me give it.
fulcrum on
Don't let
which
me give
the whole-
away
the whole
the
book
plot.
turns. But really, you know, the attention span thing, Charles Dickens is probably now literally a closed book.
Yeah. Yeah.
Don't you reckon?
Absolutely. But
What's going to happen, because this was going to be book one of a series that you and I were going to record.
no, not going to. We will, Andrew.
Well, if you haven't read the last 50 words,
No,
pages.
but our next book, The Leopard, is only 300 pages.
This is going to
Sorry
be
to give
part
it
of the
away.
Oh, is it going to be The Leopard? I love The Leopard. Do you know
And
The
then we're
Leopard?
doing Brothers Karamazov.
Lovely. We're going to do a series for the IPA of great books that you should read and John hasn't. I mean, how does that work? How does that work?
Well, I'll just ask you what happened.
On the IPA podcast, but it's held up by the fact he hasn't even read the first one yet. But the Leopard by Lampedusa. Lampedusa's a bloke, a Sicilian nobleman living in Palermo, a house in Santa Margherita del Belice, a little town that's been devastated by an earthquake. In Sicily, 58 years old, he finally writes the one masterpiece of his life because he reckoned his nephew, a cousin or something, was so dumb and he'd got a poetry prize. If he could do it, he could. So he wrote the one masterpiece, great masterpiece of the 19th century. I went there to pay homage to Santa Margherita.
I'm looking
del
forward
Belice.
to reading it.
Great thing.
But great movie.
Hey, but going back to the Christianity stuff, you know.
Oh, Charles Dickens. Christianity pervades Victorian literature, pervades social improvement. The arguments that...
You name one priest or minister who was portrayed sympathetically in any Charles Dickens work.
Well, leaving that aside, Christianity...
Yeah, no time for the church.
No, but Christianity pervades the social improvement movement that Dickens writes about, getting children out of the mines, providing children out of the workhouses, all education for women. We could have spoken to Richard Dawkins about this.
Yeah, well, the thing about Charles Dickens, I mean, you might have been Mrs. Jellyby himself, that he was preaching the civic virtues and domestic virtues. You've got to get married and blah, 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 and look after your little wife.
When the rubber hits the
And
road...
you know what happened with his own wife? He ditched her, embarrassed her, cut off his children from her, threw her out of the house, made out like she was terrible and always held him back when she'd been a loving person all the way through, and shacked up with someone else.
That sometimes happens.
Hey?
That sometimes happens.
He made a public spectacle of her. Oh, honestly. That's the type now, isn't it? That is the type. Hey, listen, the royal wedding, what do you make of it?
I had to ask the team outside, when is it happening? I am old enough to remember one of the defining events of my childhood and growing up. I still haven't got over Charles and Di's wedding. I have the Women's Weekly souvenir book. I was very excited. I think from memory it was a public holiday. Nothing can beat that.
Just
Oh, look, I mean, I love the Royals. I will, by sentiment, of course, I'm a Republican. But in practice, we have a successful system. I'll always vote no to a Republic. I think the Royals are wonderful for Australia. They're wonderful for the world. But I can't beat what happened 20, 30 years ago.
But look how
Are you excited by...
No, I'm finding... You know what I find fascinating about it? Is that here you have an institution that is so... It's supposedly standing for eternal values. Whatever happens, the monarchy will be there. It is the rock. It is the steady ship. Yet the people inhabiting this sphere are so unstable
Oh
themselves.
no, I don't
with
share
the
that
exception
view.
of the
No,
Queen.
no, I don't share that view. Look, they are like
Edward VIII.
No, they are like us. Well, not that we're married 6 times, but
Yeah, but the institution is
but
greater than the individual.
Correct, and that is the success of the institution. I reckon we could even cop Charles as king.
You're pushing it. You're pushing it. Yeah, but in some case, to some extent, sometimes the individuals seem to be so unworthy, the institution itself falls.
No, it can't, and that's the strength
It has
of
in history.
and that's the strength of this institution. And it has provided stability. It has provided something outside of the political system that we can hold on to.
John Roskam, thank you so much for saving me. The whiskey, boy, do I need it.
To freedom of speech.
Freedom of speech, what a show. Honestly, I'm ready for my weekend. Thank you. The freedom of speech. Richard Dawkins, this is not to you. What a spiker, what a loser, what a coward. Am I allowed to say that? Don't sue me.